So, a while back, a friend of mine reached out to me and asked me how I could help him grow flowers hydroponically. And I was like, that's a difficult task. Why do you want to do this? And he said his wife wanted a Shabbat vase that wouldn't die. And so I said, obviously, I'm going to give you some cuttings and we're going to make this happen. We're going to find the perfect houseplant that you can grow easily in a vase, and that way you don't have to go out and get flowers every week. So we talked about options, and I recommended one of my favorite plants to grow in water, which is Tradescantia Zebrina, aka Wandering Jew. So I'm making this video mostly to explain to my friend how to long-term take care of the plant that I'm going to give him and his wife, as well as I figured if I'm making the video and it's going to be informational in the first place, might as well put it on the internet for anyone else who wants to grow this plant the way I do. Let me also just mention I'm in the process of moving, so excuse any clutter in the background. So I have gathered here an array of a few of our different pots of Wandering Jew plants, and just to show how this plant actually grows, because understanding how the plant grows and why it's kind of unwieldy is kind of key to keeping this plant long term. So here's one in soil. And this one's cool because it's not branching out much yet. I mean, it's starting to over here and stuff, but you can see how it looks when it's long and it's still bushy. And as it gets heavier, it starts to hang down like this one, and eventually it'll just all hang off like hair instead of standing up like that. But the thing about this plant is that it tends to crisp up and drop leaves. So what you'll start to get is kind of like this one over here that I have in soil. You've got this long stem with no leaves. Now the reason I like keeping it in water is because it's kind of easier to fix this, because this plant propagates and regrows super easy. All you need to do is like take a branch of it where you've got some nodes, just like any other vining plant, and this is what the node looks like. It's these little sections, and these ones, it's not like on pothos where I've got a piece over here so I can show you where it's like nubby and it sticks out. It's a little bit nubby, but it's mostly just where those little line breaks are, where the bends, where the joints are. That's where your roots come from. So as long as you snap it in an internode, which is right here in between the nodes, you give it a clean cut and stick it back in your pot, you can make it bushier by just snipping and putting it back in whenever it starts to get leggy, which is what I call this, when it's long with no foliage, which is less desirable. So this one I've had in this pot for months, and the friend that I'm going to give cuttings of it to saw this growing in this house because I used to host a lot of events. And yeah, so I have another jar of the same kind, and I might give him a plant in this jar, and these are the cuttings I've been growing for him. And the reason I have it in here is because I don't want my friend to have to deal with what I deal with in this pot, because it's just a clear milk jug, and it looks like lake mead in there. It's all green and gross. That's the algae. And that happens when light can touch water. Algae grows with light. So I want to set my friend up for long-term success with this plant because he's not really a plant person. He just wants a pretty vase. So I'm trying to give him this one. Oh, and it's nice. It's got a little Star of David on it, so it's perfect. But this one's kind of narrow and weird, and you can't really see what's happening in here. So I don't know if this is a good option. Also, because the water level drops a lot, and this one's just generally, it's a weird vase. So I'm undecided. I'll ask his opinion. But this is what your water should look like. Ideally, it's clear, and you might have your leca balls or some kind of aerating aggregate in there. That's exactly what I have going on in here. It's just so murky you can't tell. And because this has gotten so murky, I have issues with rot with this plant. And I think in a bit, what I'm going to do is I'll try to do it on camera and take this apart and show you how I deal with it when it does, like, months down the line, your plant's starting to rot at the bottom. Yeah. I don't have a good camera stand, so we're just gonna go for it and hope for the best doing this one-handed. So I think my plan here, because I haven't done this in months to really check out what's going on in here, is I'm just gonna lift this all up and out. Oh god, ew, it's so gross in there. Ew, I should have done this closer to my bowl. And you can see, ew. Alright, so I'm just gonna let that all hang over and let this big murky root ball drip. Wow, that kind of looks pretty in there. Oh, I don't know what the hell to do with this. Okay, now that I have a game plan, I can explain what I'm doing. I am aggressively, and I say aggressively because I am just ripping the roots up, because these roots suck. But I'm separating it out. So now I can see, okay, even though I've got this crazy root ball, realistically, the actual individual strands are mostly bald, which is so funny because there's so much going on here. It looks so bushy. We have separated all of these, and I removed a bunch of the rot. You know, it's kind of still there. I'm probably going to trim it down even more. I cleaned out my other bottle with a toothbrush. You can see how clean it is now. Riley had the brilliant idea of using a toothbrush. I was just really struggling, swishing water around in there. And now I'm going to repot it back down into the jar it came out of. And this is what you do when it either gets one, too leggy, too unwieldy, it's flopping all over the place, you don't know what to do. You cut it down, you shove it back in. Or two, you would do this if you started to notice rot. Too much algae, too much rot, something like that, and you want a fresh start. Just clip the base off, shove it back in further. So I'm going to get started with snipping and placing it in my new clean jar. Now when I'm working with Wandering Jew, I have noticed if I use pruning shears like this, I run into issues. Sometimes it just like bends instead of snaps. Maybe it's the other shears, maybe it's just because they're dull. But I've noticed smaller, just really sharp scissors. These are some good scissors we have lying around. These do it much better for me. I just want to show you like how crazy some of these pieces get. This one's so twisted. Like it must have been in like that and bent over and growing back upwards. Like what? This plant is so weird. But I'm gonna snip it like probably around here, if that focused. Whatever, about there. This piece has a little bit of rot at the bottom, but I generally like its shape and what it's up to, even though it's so bald for so many spots. So I think I'm gonna cut it around here, leave some of those roots and stick it in. This is a fun piece that shows both rot. Ooh, it shows one rot. And it shows what happens when you do snip it and the way it branches. And it branches so crazy. Like this must have been a bald piece that I'd cut back and branched like that and it branched like that. And I'm probably just going to snip this whole piece off and stick it in as its own branch. Now, and ditch this original baldy branch so I can have a bushy pot instead of a weird one. Here's one where it's like, do I just leave the roots because, you know, those roots are fine. Or do I cut it down? And I think I'm gonna cut it down so that it can just keep growing well and I don't need to worry about any of the algae from these old roots entering my new pot. So I'm gonna show you. It's kind of difficult when you've got these small openings to shove all the plant you're probably gonna want in there, but you just kind of aim, wiggle it, finagle it. Yeah, those roots are kind of weird. And shove it in without breaking it. And this piece, I might actually have to cut down. I don't know why I didn't. Oh, no. Oh, we're in. And so it sits super funny. I've got one last piece here. Oh, it's a gross one. That's a gross one. We'll cut that down. We'll deal with that later. But I've pretty much got it repotted and it looks a little funny right now. Some pieces aren't sitting up right, but you put it in a nice bright spot and they will reposition themselves. They'll make themselves look good. They'll make it make sense. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I never have to use fertilizer with these. In fact, I think when I've tried, the little roots burn and I get, yellow spots on the pretty purple leaves. But it's as easy as that. When it gets bigger and crazy, trim it, take a leaf or two off from the bottom, stick it in further, put it in another pot. You've got a matching vase. That easy. So one last trick I'll mention is what to do. This is what you do if it's getting too long. If it's growing healthy, it's growing too long, or maybe it's like a little bald in the middle, like over here, but you've got foliage at the ends. So what you can do is snip it, and I'm going to actually cut this one in a weird spot. So you cut the end off at an angle. Always cut in an angle when you're pruning. And then you have a small piece, and you pop the leaf off, like that. And then you can stick this in your pot, if I can get it in. I think this piece might be too short. I just really wanted to show you how you can do that too. There's another way you can make the pot bushier. And I'll just need to add more water to this so that water actually reaches the roots. That's the other thing. You gotta really make sure that, shaky cam, that your water is covering your roots, covering your nodes. If your water level dries up below there, then your roots aren't going to grow. Your plant's not going to be happy. But I think this video is long enough, and I think I've explained enough for my friend to be able to take care of the plant I give him. Alright, have a good one. And then last, I'll mention that when it comes to my scrippy pieces like this, I think I'm just going to compost or throw it right away, because I've tried to regrow from this in the past from Wandering Jew, and it has never worked out. I've never gotten new stems or foliage from a bald piece of stem and root, even when it's like in soil. So, bleh. Ugh. I'm gonna send this swamp monster away.